be titled, "A Day Without Fish Oil is Like a Day Without Sunshine," inspired by One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, which was a title addition by Dr. Antonia. So thanks for that. Hopefully you guys all know what One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish is from. You can share in the chat if you do. Today's fish oil topic and chapter, you could say, you know, with the topic of fish oil, there's a huge amount of research, especially in the health realm, but we're specifically going to cover fish oil supplementation and recovery. And in particular, we're going to talk about following intense, vigorous exercise in the post-exercise period, looking at things such as performance and perception of soreness. Before we dive in, though, I'd love to give the background information on a topic that I'm talking about, get the nitty-gritty of the history. I really enjoy the history of different supplements. Let's talk a little bit about what are fish oils. Sometimes it can be confusing, the different types that are on the market. Brief highlights of health and safety, and then I'll talk about our data on fish oil and recovery to date. I'll also share some exciting fish oil research that we have coming up in our lab. So you could say it all began in the 1970s, the years of, and I know some of you lived through the 70s here. So you've got bell-bottom jeans. Some of you probably remember bell-bottom jeans. Disco. So I got my disco moves this morning. If I were in person, I would actually do that on the stage. You've got cool games and gadgets like Atari 2600, and I know there were other versions that came out during that time as well, but video games used to be very, very, very simple. You know, you got a button and a little toggle. And you've also got the Rubik's Cube, which is really still cool today. And I've actually got some free bottles of fish oil for anyone who sends me a video of themselves solving the Rubik's Cube by the end of the weekend. No time period, but I've got some bottles, so you can send it to me via email. I'll put my email in the chat after this, or you can send it to me on social media. And then you have it, right? The exploration of fish oils, which really could be attributed to the Danish researchers. And it really fired up in the late 60s with the first publication in the Lancet in 1971. So thanks to this team of Danish researchers who drew blood from about 130 Eskimos, and they compared the blood of these Eskimos to Danish subjects. And they found that the Eskimos had lower levels of cholesterol and triglyceride despite consuming this high-fat diet. And back in the 70s, high-fat diets were a no-no. It's all about low-fat, low-fat, low-fat. And they found, you know, this high-fat diet, consuming all of this fish, they had these high concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids in the blood, but still this lower level of cholesterol, lower triglyceride level. And they concluded and speculated that these diets plentiful in omega-3 fatty acids may actually prevent heart disease. And from there, research on omega-3 fatty acids really started booming, and especially in the health realm. And then it trickled into the exercise and performance space. Let's get into what fish oils are and discuss the different types. We're really talking about omega-3 fatty acids when we're talking about these fish oil supplements. Omega-3 fatty acids are polyunsaturated, and they're called omega-3 because the first double bond of the fatty acid is located at the third carbon from the methyl end. There are three primary types: ALA, EPA, and DHA. Oftentimes we really emphasize EPA and DHA, but yes, alpha linoleic acid is also an omega-3 fatty acid. Alpha linoleic acid, ALA, is a plant-based essential omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid, and it's essential because you have to obtain it through the diet. You can't actually create it in the body. We humans can actually synthesize, though, the other omega-3 fatty acids from ALA, and I want to show you an example here. So for example, if you consume a tablespoon of flaxseed oil, about 5 to 20% of that, depending on the person, is converted to EPA, and up to about 4% is converted to DHA. And 4% is pretty generous. Usually it's much, it's lower than that for the DHA conversion. So it's often insufficient, this conversion, to get the adequate amounts of EPA and DHA that we need. It's better to obtain it in the diet and not rely on conversion from ALA. Primary food sources, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here for many of you, include fish and crustaceans, but omega-3s, and many people don't know this, they can actually be found in other food sources, very small amounts, but dairy and meat. And if you go into the dairy section and look at milk, you'll see different milk-based products being fortified with omega-3s, or additional DHA is being added. There's more of an emphasis on omega-3s in dairy products these days. And of course, they're very commonly consumed in fish oil supplements, which we're going to chat about. Just to give you a general background here, here's a table of sources for ALA. One of the best sources tends to be flaxseed oil. Walnuts are also a great source, great addition on a salad. Also, in my opinion, they're good plain. And broccoli also has a very small amount of ALA. Here's some EPA and DHA sources. I like this table because it gives you the approximate ounces or grams to get 1 gram of EPA and DHA. For example, 1.5 ounces of herring will get you 1 gram of EPA and DHA. 2.5 ounces of salmon will get you that 1 gram. And then you do need more, right? 11 ounces of shrimp and 12.5 ounces of cod to get that 1 gram of EPA and DHA. So just to give you some general ideas of what foods we're looking at. So what's going to happen if you decide to supplement with omega-3 products like fish oil supplementation, or you consume foods with high omega-3s on a frequent and consistent basis? Well, within days and even hours in the literature, if you look, you'll get an increase in blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids. So you're going to see an increase in omega-3s right away. My dog Willow must be barking at somebody crossing the street. I'm sure they have an orange hat. She doesn't like orange hats. Or squirrels, perhaps. With longer supplementation of weeks, you're going to get an increase in omega-3 concentrations in the cell membrane. And to give you some examples, we're talking about red blood cells, skeletal muscle membrane, mitochondrial membranes as well. The key here is longer supplementation is required. It is required for that skeletal muscle and mitochondrial phospholipid uptake. You need that longer supplementation. And often the magic duration seems to be this 6-week time period or longer, 6-week time period or longer. And there has been some research, though, that has shown that in as little as 2 weeks, and this is animal model based, you'll start seeing an increase in membrane concentrations. 4 weeks, you've got a pretty good saturation, and then 6 weeks tends to be the time frame where it's a good saturation level, and you start seeing some performance changes. But there is some research to show that longer than that, 8 weeks, 12 weeks might even be better, but we haven't explored that as much in the performance literature, at least. There are different types of supplements, and it can be a little bit confusing. So I just want to give you some general background on the different supplements here. There are a lot of different products on the market, and it can definitely be difficult, I like to say, to pick your underwater friend. Which one do you want to purchase? Algae Omega is a popular supplement amongst vegetarians and plant-based diet followers. I'm a big fan of Nordic Naturals. They make really, really good supplements. I do a lot of testing, so Algae Omega is a great option. Fish oil supplements are by far the most popular, though, when it comes to omega-3 supplements. There are two primary forms. So you can go to the store and you can look at different fish oil supplements and you'll see some differences in prices and what it says on the label. But if it comes down to it, there are two primary forms, a triglyceride form and an ethyl ester form. So often abbreviated EE. So you got a triglyceride form and an ethyl ester, which the scientific community has done a really nice job of breaking down for us and studying, hey, which might be better. I like to compare it to a UFC matchup, right? Where one individual might have a slight advantage over the other. But when it comes down to it, pretty equal matchup. And I'll show you some of the data here. If you compare the two forms, triglyceride form might be slightly better. There's one common element, though. If you look at the studies like Lully, Kraken, and Hansen, if you look at that research where they found no difference between ethyl ester and triglyceride form, one thing in particular that stands out is that the participants took the ethyl ester form with a meal, and that meal was in the presence of dietary fat. In the presence of dietary fat. And when that happened, it seemed that there was no difference between triglyceride form, ethyl ester form on the omega-3 index concentrations in the blood. So really, in the end, no major differences in the two types when it comes to increases in membrane content, uptake, and outcome variables like cardiovascular related markers, cholesterol, triglycerides. There is no evidence to date and no research to date saying one form is actually superior to the other for exercise performance outcomes. So if you're a doc student, master student looking for some research, that would be kind of a cool study, I think, to compare ethyl ester and triglyceride on different performance outcomes. I don't personally think you'd find anything, but something cool to consider for future research. The major cost, though, the major difference is cost. The major difference is absolutely cost. Triglyceride form is much more expensive than ethyl ester forms. In the end, you got to definitely think about your budget and think about the company you're purchasing from, because some companies definitely have been criticized for high concentrations of toxins, such as lead, arsenic, mercury in their products. The majority of companies have definitely cleaned up their act, no pun intended, and have extensive cleaning and purification processes. Nothing of major concern for the most part these days. If you're pregnant, I caution you to pay more and closer attention. But my recommendation is to review certifications and testing of the company you're purchasing from if you're concerned. And I recommend this not for just fish oil, but for other supplements as well. A popular certification process, I posted it up there on the right hand of your screen, is the NutriSource certification process. A lot of companies choose to use this. Other than that, in terms of side effects, little to none side effects, occasional fish burps, which I'm sure many of us have experienced, possibly some fish breath. You can chew some gum, use a mint if that's an issue, and some GI distress at higher concentrations. At higher concentrations, 6 grams, 8 grams, you might get a little GI distress, but even that is rare. Research shows benefits absolutely outweigh the risks. And that's why I say a day without fish oil is like a day without sunshine. Because despite what you see in the performance literature, which we're going to get into some of our work in that here in a few minutes, the health benefits are very clear cut with lots of good research on improvements in cardiovascular health, mental disorders, improvements in health related to different mental disorders, even eye, skin, and liver health, bone health. There's some really cool research on fish oils improving bone turnover, which is an area we've been looking into lately in our lab. allergies and asthma symptoms, reducing symptoms of depression, and even supporting pregnancy. So a day without fish oil is like a day without sunshine. And I love the sun, and there's no sun here today. It's raining, but we do have fish oil and a lot of good science on a Saturday. So I'm pleased with that for sure. When it comes to the exercise space, fish oil has been shown to benefit muscle recovery, muscle adaptations, inflammation and immunity, often associated with reducing inflammation. Cardiovascular performance is a really cool area of research. In particular, there's been some research showing that fish oil supplementation, long-term fish oil supplementation, can improve VO2 max performance in more untrained or clinical-based populations. Are you going to see a 10% increase? No, you're not going to see that. It's very minor, but some cool research there. I didn't put this on the slide, and I should have, but there's some really great research on HRV, heart rate variability, coming out. Improved recovery from injury, that likely is associated with changes in inflammation, reducing inflammation. Cognitive performance is kind of a hot new area in the fish oil supplementation research realm. It has to do mostly with DHA, so not EPA, but more DHA uptake in the brain. Impact on respiratory function, mostly associated with upper respiratory illnesses, such as reducing upper respiratory tract illnesses, especially in the endurance athlete who's out running in a lot of different weather changes. So going from warm weather, cold weather, etc. It should be highlighted here, though, fish oil in these realms, in these different areas, there's a lot of mixed research. Some saying it helps, some saying it doesn't do anything. And that likely has to do with study design, including types of supplements, so triglyceride, ethyl ester, dosages, EPA and DHA ratio, duration of supplementation, type of muscle damaging exercise, which is what we have focused on. And if you look in that literature realm, it's from repeated drop jumps, such as stepping off a box 100 times, to multiple sets of eccentric squats, which could be significantly more damaging. I don't see repeated drop jumps being that damaging, especially for trained individuals. So a lot of differences in the study design in the literature for fish oil. So you must consider those. While most of the work in the literature to date has been focused on 2 to 4 grams, my work and our lab's work has primarily been focused in the area of high dose fish oil supplementation and recovery from exercise, looking at things like perceived soreness and performance recovery. The first study I want to highlight was published in Nutrients last year. We investigated and looked at the impact of 3 different dosages on recovery of muscular performance. We also looked at perceived soreness and markers of muscle damage, indirect markers of muscle damage, following an eccentric bout of exercise. And I love this study because we enrolled both men and women, 16 and 16, and they were rec trained individuals. They did have to engage in both resistance and endurance or aerobic type exercise each week. The supplement breakdown was 2, 4, and 6 grams. So most of the literature had been focused on that 2 gram versus placebo, or 4 grams versus placebo. We wanted to bump it up and look at 2, 4, and 6 grams of fish oil. And that ended up resulting in 1,400. So you got 1,400, 2,800, and 4,200 milligrams of EPA and DHA total per day. Supplementation duration. So following 7 weeks, so they had a 6-week run-in period here before they actually did 1 RM and familiarization testing. Of course, we had, the visit 1 screening and supplement distribution. They had a week, an additional week, and then they came back to the lab to perform the eccentric exercise bout. And that eccentric exercise bout consisted of 10 sets, 8 reps, 70%, 1 RM, 4-second lowering, 1 second up, using a Smith machine. And we use a Smith machine for safety purposes. For good measure, right after that, after those 10 sets, we asked them to do 5 sets of 20 consecutive split jump squats after they finished. It was brutal. People were definitely hurting and very sore in the follow-up periods up to that 72-hour period. 3 minutes of rest between squats and 2 minutes of rest between those split jump squats. We did look at muscular performance in particular. Right down here, you can see the highlights. We looked at vertical jump, 40-yard dash, T-test, and maximal voluntary isometric contractions. We used a Biodex looking at lower body knee extensors. Perceived soreness, we collected perceived soreness at multiple time points, and also collected blood for the analysis of CK and lactate dehydrogenase. So looking at those as indirect markers of muscle damage. The study was really comprehensive. We looked at these time points at immediately post 1, 2, 4, 24, 48, and 72 hours. It was a big study, super thankful for the participants. They held on, and the research assistants who were in there helping me collect this data. What did we find? Like similar studies, no significant impact on maximal voluntary isometric contraction. We didn't see anything in regards to that MVIC in the lower body knee extensors in terms of recovery between the dosages and compared to placebo. No significant impact on 40-yard sprint, so nothing there in the post-exercise period. We did, however, and this is similar to outcomes in the published literature, so other research, we did find that fish oil supplementation helped with recovery of acute power production assessed by vertical jump. And this only occurred in the 6 gram per day group, only in the 6 gram per day group. So we did see improvements here in the 6 gram per day group. Also similar and probably most promising in the fish oil and recovery from muscle damaging exercise research to date is the perception of soreness data. We actually saw lower soreness scores observed in the 6 gram group compared to placebo, starting at the 2-hour mark post muscle damaging exercise. And that actually continued through the 24, 48, and 72-hour time periods. CK and LDH, those again were our markers of choice to assess muscle damage indirectly. What you can take away from this is yes, the exercise protocol was a butt-kicking experience. Have a look here. The 2 gram group at baseline was approximately 90 IUs per liter. And if you take a look, this always blows my mind here. Up to 24 hours, you've got 3,020 on average at the 24-hour period. So just one example, and you can see it's consistent here, 4 grams, 108, and up to that 2,058 IUs in just the 24-hour period. So yeah, the exercise was damaging, releasing that CK. It's a similar story for the LDH here down at the bottom. Very much a similar story for that LDH at the bottom. Overall, CK and LDH tended to be lower for the 6 gram per day group fish oil supplementation, but this wasn't significant. So you can see in the 24-hour period here, it is lower here, 544 on average. It is a lot lower, but it wasn't significant. Lower here and lower in the 72-hour period. Same story down at the bottom for LDH in the 24, 48, 72-hour time periods, but not significant. But maybe, you know, a trend there, something to consider. What's the take home from this study? 6 grams might be superior to lower dosages for rec trained men and women compared to those 2-4 gram dosages if somebody's undergoing some vigorous damaging exercise. And in particular, what's it going to be superior for? Maybe perceived muscle soreness and perhaps for restoring that acute lower body power production. A second study I'll highlight, what we just recently finished. It's currently unpublished. This was a collaboration with Long Beach State, in particular Lauren, who's pictured here on the left. This was her thesis study. And we continued with our theme of high dosages, and in particular, curious about, you know, could we do more acute supplementation and still a higher dosage and see some outcomes here, see some positive benefits. We decided to bump up the dosage and see how it'd play out. 30 male participants, 30 days of supplementation, placebo, 6 grams, and then we went 8 grams per day. Same eccentric exercise protocol we used in our 2020 paper, those hellish eccentric squats, and performance and soreness assessments at pre, 24, 48, and the 72-hour time period. So we decided just to leave the immediate post assessments out and just go with that 24, 48, and 72-hour time periods. Results for vertical jump, both 6 and 8 grams were better than placebo. They were better. 8 grams tended. It was not significant to be better than 6 grams. So you can see here, not as much of a drop here in that 8 gram group. Not as much of a drop. Perceived soreness. Soreness was significantly higher at 24, 48, and 72 hours. Something interesting about the perceived soreness data, and if you take a look there, and this is, and I'm sorry, I cut the time points off here. This is 24, 48, 72. But if you look at this, they actually never recovered. It was significantly higher, still at 72 hours. Never recovered for any of the groups to pre-values. So ouch, definitely hurt. We also looked at hip range and knee range of motion, did not see any differences in hip range and knee range of motion. CK values definitely increased, all right, definitely increased. CK actually kept climbing, consistent with the perceived soreness. It never recovered. It kept going up into that 72-hour period. No differences between groups or improvements in CK levels due to supplementation. Take-home notes from this study: 6 grams and 8 grams compared to placebo. It didn't help with recovery. We can speculate a slew of reasons why, right? But perhaps the supplementation was too acute. 30 days was not enough. And that's consistent in the literature where you need that longer supplementation. 4 weeks might not be long enough. 6 weeks and longer is kind of your ticket. That seems like the most logical reason to me. But definitely answering those questions are important, because if somebody asks you, hey, can I take fish oil supplementation, really, really high dosage for a short period of time, and will it benefit me? Or not so sure. Overall, we just have a few more slides here. In the literature, there are about 20 studies. It kind of depends on who you ask and their criteria set, but it's right around the 20 range. Research is definitely focused on higher EPA dosages compared to DHA. If you were to summarize it, and I like this, knowing this kind of, culminating take-home message, about 50% of the data shows improved perceived soreness and improved recovery of performance. But that performance recovery tends to only be in very acute performance tests like vertical jump. So it's about half and half. Half say there's a benefit in the post-exercise period, half say there is not. And the dosage range tends to be between about 2 and 6 grams for the most part. Benefits seem to be better with longer duration supplementation, 6 weeks or more. So often the question I get is, would you take it? Well, absolutely, yes. There are so many benefits outside of just performance recovery and perceived soreness. Totally worth it. 2 thumbs up. You should definitely take fish oil supplementation. If you want to learn more, there's some really great reviews. And I want to give a shout out to Jeffrey, who's on this call today. So 3 thumbs up to Jeffrey. He just published a really great review out of Baylor. Kudos to you. Definitely read that paper of his. Before we wrap up and answer some questions, and I know I probably am tight on time, so I can answer your questions on or in the chat. But before that, I want to just tell you one exciting thing about what we've got going on at KSU. We recently were awarded a grant to do some fish oil work. I want to highlight Brent Yukin. He's on this call too, I believe, today, who's a graduate student I'm lucky to work with at KSU. He's pictured right here. This is Brent, and he actually just did a podcast with Mike T. Nelson, which some of you know. And we are going to look at the isolated, thanks to, this was Brent's idea. It's fabulous. I love it. Look at more of the isolated effects of EPA and DHA rather than the combination. We're going to do a 16-week supplementation study in middle-aged adults, both men and women, and look at a host of outcomes from HRV to body composition to exercise performance and different blood markers. So look for that data out of our lab. Very exciting. He created this really, really great website that we're going to use for recruitment once we go live very soon. And with that, thanks for listening. Appreciate you all for being with us today. The remaining speakers are